They thought Elijah Walker would be an easy target, the new black scholarship student in Crestfield Academy's sea of privilege. Trent Davis and his 4 followers, known simply as the Five, ruled the school through fear and humiliation, their family connections making them untouchable. When they cornered Elijah behind the gym for their standard initiation, they expected the usual trembling submission. Instead, with one fluid movement, Elijah redirected Chase's attack and left him sprawled on the ground, confusion replacing arrogance. "One of you is going to break first," Elijah said quietly before walking away. The 5 didn't realize they'd just challenged the son of a military intelligence operative, a young man who'd been taught that the eyes reveal intention before the body moves, that patience conquers force, and that true power lies in knowing your opponent's weaknesses before they know yours. They'd picked a fight with someone who'd been trained his entire life for exactly this kind of war. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The morning sun gleamed off the pristine brick facade of Crestfield Academy as Elijah Walker stood at the entrance, his worn backpack slung over one shoulder. He took a deep breath, straightened his navy blue button-up shirt, and pushed through the heavy oak doors. Inside, the hallway stretched before him like a gauntlet. Marble floors reflected the morning light streaming through tall windows. Trophy cases lined the walls, filled with golden statues and framed photos of smiling white faces. Students moved in small clusters, their conversations falling silent as Elijah passed. He felt their stares like tiny pinpricks against his skin, but kept his eyes forward, his face a carefully composed mask of calm. "That's him," someone whispered. "Scholarship case," another voice added. Elijah had expected this. His father's words echoed in his mind. "They'll see your skin before they see your brain. Let them underestimate you." The main office was a wood-paneled room with a middle-aged white woman seated behind the reception desk. She looked up from her computer, her smile tightening slightly at the sight of him. "You must be Elijah Walker," she said, her voice carrying the practiced warmth of someone who had been trained in diversity seminars. "Welcome to Crestfield. I have your schedule right here." As she handed him the paper, Elijah noticed her perfectly manicured nails and the way she seemed careful not to let their fingers touch. He took the schedule with a polite nod. "Thank you, ma'am." His first class was advanced calculus with Mr. Peterson. The classroom was already half full when he arrived, students lounging in their seats with the casual confidence of those who'd never questioned their belonging. Elijah found an empty desk near the window and sat down, keeping his movements quiet and deliberate. Mr. Peterson, a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses, began roll call promptly as the bell rang. The names he called painted a picture of old money and legacy. Anderson, Bailey, Cooper, Davis. "Elijah Walker?" "Present," Elijah answered, his deep voice carrying across the room. A tall boy with sandy blonde hair and an expensive watch leaned back in his seat, his smile gleaming white against tanned skin. "Hey, Peterson, I think he might be in the wrong classroom. Remedial math is down the hall, right?" Laughter rippled through the room. Mr. Peterson frowned but did nothing to address the comment. "Trent, that's enough." Elijah didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't react at all. He simply turned his gaze to meet Trent's, his dark eyes steady and unblinking. Something in that look, the complete absence of either fear or anger, made Trent's smile falter for just a moment. The class moved on. Mr. Peterson launched into a lecture about differential equations, scribbling formulas across the whiteboard. 15 minutes in, he presented a problem he claimed was particularly challenging. "This one stumped even some of my college students," he said with a small, proud smile. "Would anyone like to attempt it?" The room remained silent. Mr. Peterson's eyes scanned the faces before him, finally landing on Elijah. "Mr. Walker, since you're new, perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself to the class by giving this a try." It wasn't really a question. Elijah stood and walked to the board, aware of the eyes following him. He took the marker, studied the problem for a moment, then began working through it with swift, confident strokes. His handwriting was neat, methodical, When he finished, he capped the marker and turned to face the class. Mr. Peterson blinked, clearly surprised. That's correct. And you used a shortcut I hadn't considered. He peered at Elijah with new interest. Where did you attend school before Crestfield? East Side High, sir, Elijah answered. Well, they clearly have an excellent math program, Mr. Peterson said, though his tone suggested disbelief. From the corner of his eye, Elijah could see Trent's jaw clench, his knuckles whitening as he gripped his expensive pen. The rest of the class stared at Elijah with a mixture of surprise and unease. As he returned to his seat, a folded piece of paper landed on his desk. Elijah opened it carefully, revealing a message in small, neat handwriting. They always pick one, be careful. He glanced up, searching for the sender, and met the eyes of a girl with curly hair pulled back in a loose bun, her skin a warm brown, a few shades lighter than his own. She gave him the briefest of nods before turning back to her notebook. Her name, he recalled from roll call, was Kara Williams. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of new classrooms, new teachers, and variations of the same stairs. By lunch, Elijah had begun to map the invisible boundaries of Crestfield. The school might not have official segregation, but the unwritten rules were clear in the way students clustered together in the cafeteria. Trent sat at a central table, surrounded by 4 others who carried themselves with the same entitled ease. Logan Mitchell, a lean boy with perfectly styled dark hair who never seemed to put his phone down. Chase Wilson, broad-shouldered and sporting a varsity jacket. Brandon Thomas, whose boyish face belied the cruelty in his eyes. And Tyler Freeman, slightly smaller than the others, with a nervous energy that made him seem perpetually on edge. Elijah took in the room with one sweeping glance. The athletes had their territory near the windows. The studious types clustered around tables near the wall outlets for their laptops. The artsy students claimed a corner adorned with student murals. And there, in the middle of it all, was a single empty table, conspicuously vacant, as if reserved for some unspoken purpose. He made his way toward it, his tray balanced in one hand. The cafeteria noise dimmed slightly as he sat down, alone in the center of the room. He unwrapped his sandwich with calm precision, took out a book, and began to read as he ate, ignoring the stares. A flash went off. Elijah looked up to see Logan, pointing his phone camera directly at him, smirking as he typed something. Got it, Logan announced to his friends. Caption: Outsider feeding time. The others laughed, but Elijah simply returned to his book. The lack of response seemed to irritate them more than any reaction could have. Minutes later, Brandon approached, carrying a can of soda that sloshed suspiciously close to the rim. He pretended to trip just as he passed Elijah's table, sending a wave of sticky brown liquid across Elijah's shirt and book. Oh man, I'm so sorry, Brandon said, his voice dripping with false concern. Total accident. The cafeteria went quiet, all eyes on Elijah, waiting for his response. A confrontation, tears, anger, anything to confirm their expectations. Instead, Elijah calmly set his ruined book aside, reached into his backpack, and pulled out a neatly folded spare shirt. Without a word, he stood, gathered his things, and walked to the bathroom to change, his face betraying nothing. As he passed through the cafeteria doors, whispers followed him. This wasn't what they'd expected. This wasn't how new kids, especially new black kids at Crestfield, were supposed to act. In English class that afternoon, Elijah found a momentary reprieve. The teacher, Ms. Carter, was one of the few black faculty members at Crestfield. She greeted Elijah with a warm smile that held something like recognition, perhaps even pride. Mr. Walker, I read your entrance essay, she said as he took his seat. Your analysis of Baldwin was quite impressive. Thank you, Ms. Carter, he replied, feeling a genuine smile touch his lips for the first time that day. The moment of connection was short-lived. In history, Mr. Lawson, a white man with a bow tie and elbow patches on his tweed jacket, made a point of interrupting Elijah whenever he spoke. Mr. Walker, while your colorful urban slang might be acceptable elsewhere, at Crestfield, we prefer proper English, he said after Elijah had answered a question about the Civil War. Elijah, who had used no slang whatsoever, simply nodded. "I apologize, sir. I'll be more mindful of my language." The final class of the day was debate, where Trent took center stage. The topic was local politics, and Trent was in his element. "My father's mayoral re-election campaign is focused on economic growth," he said, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone raised on political speeches. "Under his leadership, the city has seen a 12% increase in new business development." When it was Elijah's turn to speak, he stood with unhurried confidence. "While new business development is certainly important," he said, "the most recent census data shows that under the current mayor's leadership, income inequality in our city has increased by 17%, with the lowest economic quartile seeing a net decrease in real wages." The classroom fell silent. Trent's smile tightened, his eyes hardening. "And where exactly did you find these statistics?" he asked. "The Bureau of Labor Statistics' most recent regional report," Elijah replied, evenly. Page 42. The bell rang, ending class and saving Trent from having to respond. But the damage was done. As students filed out, the whispers grew louder. The new kid had challenged Trent Davis, son of Mayor William Davis, with facts he couldn't dispute. After school, Elijah made his way to the basketball courts behind the gym. He'd seen them from the classroom window and thought they might offer a quiet place to decompress before heading home. He was wrong. "Hey, new kid," Elijah turned to see Trent approaching, flanked by Logan, Chase, Brandon, and Tyler. They spread out, forming a loose semicircle around him. "We've got a tradition here at Crestfield," Trent said, his voice friendly even as his eyes remained cold. "All new students have to go through a little initiation." "Nothing serious," Chase added, cracking his knuckles. "Just a friendly hazing to welcome you to our family." Elijah stood still, watching them. Not their movements, but their eyes. His father had taught him that the eyes always betrayed intention before the body did. "What? No questions?" Logan taunted, phone out and already recording. "Not even curious what the hazing involves?" Elijah remained silent, his gaze steady, assessing each of them in turn. They shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. "Maybe he's too scared to talk," Brandon suggested, stepping forward. "Let me help you loosen up." He reached out to shove Elijah's shoulder. In one fluid motion, Elijah caught Brandon's wrist, twisted it just enough to control without causing pain, and used the boy's own momentum to spin him off balance. Brandon stumbled, confusion replacing the smug confidence on his face. "What the—" Chase began, but Elijah had already released Brandon and stepped back. His posture relaxed once more. Elijah finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "One of you is gonna break first." Then he walked away, leaving them standing. There, the power dynamic shifted in ways they couldn't quite understand. From behind the gym wall, Kara watched the scene unfold, her sketchbook clutched to her chest, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something that might have been hope. "Tut." Garage door groaned as it rolled up, revealing 13-year-old Elijah standing on a worn mat facing his father. Samuel Walker's muscular frame was silhouetted against the afternoon light, his stance wide and balanced. Despite being out of the service for years, he still carried himself with military precision. "Remember, son," Samuel said, circling Elijah, slowly, "fighting is the last resort of a man who's run out of intelligence." Young Elijah nodded, his eyes tracking his father's movement. "Yes, sir. Before a man throws a punch, his eyes tell you where it's going. Before he speaks a lie, his breath changes. Your job isn't to react, it's to anticipate." Samuel lunged suddenly, his hand reaching for Elijah's shoulder. Elijah sidestepped, not with fear, but with practiced precision. "Good," Samuel nodded. "You don't need fists when you have foresight." The memory faded as present-day Elijah sat at his desk, turning a small USB drive between his fingers. It had been among his father's personal effects, passed to him after the funeral 3 months. The label read simply, "Insurance." Elijah plugged it into his laptop and found it encrypted. After several attempts using combinations of his father's military ID and family birthdays, the drive unlocked, revealing dozens of folders. Most contained military reports and personal journals from Samuel's time in intelligence, but one folder stood out: local targets, public figures. Inside were detailed profiles on several prominent citizens, including William Davis, Trent's father. The information was meticulously organized: financial records, private communications, surveillance photos. Elijah's hand hovered over the keyboard, his father's voice echoing in his mind. Information isn't just power, it's responsibility. The next morning at Crestfield, subtle shifts were already happening. Brandon was being escorted to the principal's office, his face pale. Rumors spread quickly. He'd been caught cheating on a math test, claiming afterward that the online testing system had glitched. In the hallway before English, Elijah noticed Chase dropping his water bottle, his hands trembling visibly as he tried to pick it up. On the football field during PE, Coach Bennett pulled Chase aside after he fumbled 3 easy passes. "Get it together, Wilson," the coach barked. "What's wrong with your hands today?" But the most interesting development came at lunch. Trent stormed into the cafeteria, making a beeline for Elijah's table. He slammed his phone down, the screen displaying a photo of Trent's girlfriend texting with Elijah, a conversation that had never happened. "What the hell is this?" Trent demanded, his face flushed. Elijah looked at the screen, then back at Trent with genuine confusion. "I've never texted your girlfriend," he said simply. "I don't even have her number." "Then explain." "This," Trent jabbed at the screen. "I can't," Elijah replied. "But it looks like someone's trying to mess with you. Might want to figure out who that is." Doubt flickered across Trent's face, quickly replaced by anger. But before he could respond, a teacher approached, and he was forced to retreat, taking his phone with him. After the final bell, Elijah opened his locker to find a small slip of paper with coordinates and a time: midnight. His curiosity piqued. He tucked the note into his pocket and continued home. That night, the coordinates led him to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. Cautious but intrigued, Elijah approached the side door, which opened before he could knock. "You came alone." "Good," said a voice from inside. Elijah stepped into a dimly lit room where 4 students waited. He recognized Sarah Peterson, a quiet girl who'd once been on the debate team; Milo Chen, known for his computer skills; Tasha Washington, active in the AV club; and Darius Johnson, who sat in a wheelchair, his once athletic frame now diminished. "We've been watching you," Sarah said, gesturing for him to sit. "You're not like the others who tried to stand up to them." "The others?" Elijah asked. Darius wheeled forward. "I was varsity football until last year. Had a scholarship lined up and everything. Then I questioned Chase about some hazing stuff. And a week later, I'm in a training accident that shattered my spine." Trent's group. The 5, they call themselves. They've been running Crestfield for years, Milo explained, his fingers nervously tapping his laptop. Teachers look the other way. Principal, too. They're untouchable. Until now, Tasha added, her eyes fixed on Elijah. "You got under their skin without even trying. We want to know how." Elijah considered them carefully. "What exactly are you?" "Proposing? An alliance," Sarah said. "You clearly have some kind of plan. We want in." "And if I don't have a plan? Then we'd be very disappointed," Milo replied, turning his laptop to show surveillance footage of Elijah's encounter with the group behind the gym. "Because this wasn't luck." Elijah leaned back, weighing his options. These 4 had suffered at the hands of the 5. They were motivated and likely resourceful, but they were also wild cards. "I'll lead," he finally said, "but only if you follow my rules. No violence, no attention-seeking. We don't fight them. We unravel them." The seam. Others exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. "One more thing," Elijah added. "Why me? Why now?" Sarah's expression darkened. "Because after what happened to Alicia, we can't wait any longer." Before Elijah could ask who Alicia was, the meeting adjourned with plans to reconnect the following day. The next morning, Kara caught up with Elijah in the hallway before first period. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice low. "Somewhere private." They found an empty classroom, and Kara pulled out a sketchbook from her bag. "I think you should see these." The pages contained hauntingly detailed caricatures of school life at Crestfield. One showed a teacher turning away as a smaller student was pushed into a locker. Another depicted the principal shaking hands with Mayor Davis while money changed hands behind their backs. "You've been documenting this," Elijah observed, turning the pages carefully. Kara nodded. "Art's the only way I know how to fight back." He paused at a drawing of a girl crying in a bathroom stall. The caption read, "Missing, Alicia." "Who is she?" Elijah asked. Kara's eyes grew distant. "Alicia Rivera. She was my friend. Last year she went to one of the Fives parties. 3 days later, her parents pulled her out of school. No explanation, no goodbyes, just gone." "And no one investigated?" "Principal said her family moved suddenly for personal reasons. But her little brother still goes to the middle school. Her car's still in their garage. It doesn't add up." Elijah handed the sketchbook back, his mind racing. "Thank you for showing me this." That night, using skills his father had taught him, Elijah managed to hack into Logan's cloud storage. What he found made his blood run cold. Dozens of videos, meticulously organized. Freshman hazing, locker room, party blackmail. The footage showed humiliations, fights, and worse, all involving Crestfield students, with the Five, either orchestrating or filming. Most disturbing was how some videos had view counts and dollar amounts attached. Logan wasn't just recording. These incidents, he was selling them to an anonymous online audience. Elijah downloaded enough evidence to understand the operation without taking everything. He needed to be strategic, patient. This wasn't just about high school bullies anymore. It was about something much darker. The next day, students arrived at school to find the Crestfield website redirected to a video clip showing Trent mocking a disabled janitor, pushing the man's cleaning cart down a hallway while doing a cruel imitation of his limp. The clip was only 30 seconds long, but it was enough. By noon, local news sites had picked up the story, questioning the behavior of the mayor's son. Trent was called to the principal's office and emerged claiming he'd been hacked, his reputation smeared by anonymous trolls. But the damage was done. Small cracks were beginning to form in his perfectly curated image. After school, Ms. Carter asked Elijah to stay behind for a moment. "I noticed you've been spending time with Kara Williams," she said once the other students had left. "Is that a problem?" Elijah asked. Ms. Carter sighed, removing her glasses. "No. In fact, she could use a friend. But I feel I should warn you. This school has a way of protecting its legacy students, no matter what they do." "I appreciate the concern, Ms. Carter, but I can handle myself." She studied him for a moment. "I believe you can. Just be careful." "Elijah, the power structures here go beyond the school walls." As if to confirm her warning, Mr. Green, the guidance counselor, called Elijah into his office the following day. "Mr. Walker," he began, his tone friendly, but his eyes cold. "You've made quite an impression in your short time here." "I'm just trying to focus on my education, sir." Of course, that's commendable." Mr. Green leaned forward. "But there's more to a successful high school experience than just academics. There's learning to fit in, to respect the established order." Elijah met his gaze steadily. "Are you suggesting I've been disrespectful, Mr. Green?" "Not at all. I'm simply offering friendly advice." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Crestfield has a certain way of doing things. Students who disrupt that system often find themselves unhappy here." The warning was clear, but Elijah had no intention of backing down. In fact, the pieces were already in motion for his first major move. The following week, Elijah was scheduled to give a presentation in computer science on network security. As he connected his laptop to the projector, a glitch occurred. Instead of his slides, the screen displayed a 5-second clip of Logan forcing a freshman to drink something that made the younger boy vomit violently while the Five laughed. The teacher rushed to shut off the projector, but it was too late. Several students had already recorded the clip on their phones, and by the end of the day, it had spread throughout the school. Logan was furious, cornering Elijah by the lockers after last period. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he hissed. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Elijah simply looked at him, calm as ever. "I think I do," he replied. "The question is, do you know who you're messing with?" For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Logan's face as he backed away. That evening, as Elijah walked home, he noticed a black SUV following him at a distance. He took an unexpected turn down an alley, emerging on a parallel street. But the vehicle reappeared moments later. Someone was watching him. The game had escalated. His phone buzzed with a text from Kara. "The underground wants to meet again, tomorrow night, same place." Elijah typed back, "I'll be there." The first phase was complete. The cracks were showing. Now it was time to push harder. The corridors of Crestfield Academy hummed with a new energy as Elijah walked to his locker Monday morning. The video of Logan's hazing incident had spread like wildfire over the weekend, and now students watched Elijah with a mixture of fear, admiration, and curiosity. Their whispers followed him like shadows. "Did you see how he just stared Logan down? I heard he has dirt on all of them. My cousin says he got kicked out of his last school for hacking the principal's email." Elijah ignored the rumors, methodically, exchanging books at his locker. The whispers were useful. They created an aura around him, a shield of uncertainty. Let them speculate. Let them wonder. Kara appeared beside him, her curly hair pulled back with colorful clips. "You've become an urban legend overnight," she said quietly. "Half the school thinks you're some kind of vigilante hacker. And the other half? They're waiting to see what happens when the five strike back." She glanced nervously down the hall. "They will, you know." "I'm counting on it," Elijah replied. Closing his locker. "Student council meeting after school today, right?" Kara nodded. "Tech committee at 3. Why?" "I think I should join." Her eyes widened. "That's Trent's territory. His father's donations funded the entire tech lab." "Exactly." That afternoon, Elijah showed up at the tech committee meeting with Kara. The room fell silent as he entered. Jessica Baker, the committee head and a known ally of Trent, looked up from her tablet with unconcealed surprise. "We're not accepting new members mid-semester," she said flatly. Elijah smiled politely. "Actually, the student council bylaws state that committees must remain open to new participants throughout the academic year, provided there's capacity." He placed a printed copy of the bylaws on the table, a specific section highlighted. "I believe you currently have 7 members and the maximum is 12. Jessica looked flustered. "Well, you'd need an existing member to sponsor you and—" "I'll sponsor him," Kara interrupted, surprising even herself with her boldness. With no legitimate grounds to refuse him, Jessica reluctantly added Elijah to the roster. "We're reviewing budget allocations today," she said. "Try to keep up." What she didn't mention was that the tech committee had access to all digital records of student council spending, precisely what Elijah was after. While Jessica droned on about allocations for new tablets, he discreetly accessed the committee's shared drive from his laptop and began downloading financial records. Later that night, at his desk at home, Elijah pored over the documents. Within an hour, he'd found what he was looking for: a pattern of fraudulent reimbursements. Trent had been submitting duplicate expense reports for tech equipment, with his father's assistant signing off on all of them. The total amounted to over $3,000 funneled from student council funds directly into Trent's pocket. Elijah didn't act immediately. Timing was everything. Instead, he spent the next day focusing on Brandon, the weakest link in the 5. Using skills learned from his father's files, Elijah manipulated a timestamp on the school's server, creating a fake login session that appeared to come from Brandon's account. The session showed someone accessing a teacher's personal email and sending harassing messages. By Wednesday morning, Brandon was being called into the principal's office again. This time, he emerged visibly shaken, his status in the robotics. "Club revoked pending investigation. I didn't do it," he insisted to anyone who would listen. "Someone's setting me up." But few believed him. Brandon's reputation for mean-spirited pranks made the accusation all too credible. With Brandon effectively neutralized, Elijah turned his attention to Tyler Freeman, the most uncertain member of the five. Unlike the others, Tyler often seemed uncomfortable with their cruelty, participating more out of fear than malice. Elijah found his opportunity in the library during study hall. Tyler sat alone, hunched over a textbook, occasionally glancing around as if expecting someone to approach. Elijah took the seat across from him. "We need to talk," Elijah said quietly. Tyler's eyes darted nervously to the door. "Are you crazy? If they see us—" "No one's watching right now," Elijah assured him. "But they will be soon. You need to ask yourself which side you want to be on when everything falls apart." "I don't know what you're talking about," Tyler whispered, but his trembling hands betrayed him. "Yes, you do." Elijah leaned in closer. "You're not like them, Tyler. You never were. You're just scared." Tyler stared at his textbook, silent for a long moment. "You don't understand," he finally said, his voice barely audible. "Logan has things on me. Videos. He says he'll release them if I ever cross them." "Blackmail." Elijah nodded. "I suspected as much." "I hate being part of it all," Tyler confessed, his eyes suddenly wet. "The stuff they do to people. What they did to Alicia." He stopped abruptly, looking horrified at what he'd almost revealed. "I can help you," Elijah said, sliding a small burner phone across the table. "This has a voice recorder app. Use it when the time's right." Tyler hesitated, then quickly pocketed the phone. "If they find out—" "They won't," Elijah promised. "Not until it's too late." Later that week, Elijah witnessed Logan cornering Kara in the art room after classes had ended. He stood in the doorway, watching as Logan picked up one of Kara's sketches. AI, haunting portrait of Alicia. "Still obsessed with the missing girl, huh?" Logan sneered. "Maybe you should be more worried about yourself." Kara snatched the drawing back. "Leave me alone, Logan." "Or what?" He stepped closer. "You gonna call your new bodyguard? The guy's been here, 2 weeks? And suddenly thinks he runs the place?" He knocked over a cup of brushes, sending them clattering to the floor. "You tell him to back off, or—" The shrill sound of the fire alarm cut through the building. Logan jumped, startled by the sudden noise. Students and teachers began filing into the hallway. In the confusion, Elijah slipped away from the art room before Logan could spot him, his hand still warm from pulling the alarm. That weekend, word spread about a party at Chase Wilson's mansion. His parents were away on business, and the five were planning something big. Elijah received a text from Tyler with the details. Saturday night, 10 p.m., invitation only. "Perfect," Elijah muttered, immediately calling Milo. "I need surveillance." "On it," Milo replied. "I've got a drone with night vision capability. We can monitor the exterior and get audio if they're near windows." "Good. And Tasha? She set up a student gossip account that's already got 500 followers. Anything juicy, and we can leak it anonymously." Saturday night, as the party raged at Chase's mansion, Elijah sat in Milo's garage with the underground team, watching. Live drone footage on multiple screens. Most of it was typical high school party stuff. Drinking, dancing, showing off. But around midnight, the drone captured Chase on the back patio, bragging loudly to a group of senior boys. "My dad's pharmaceutical connections," Chase slurred, holding up a small bag of pills. "Best stuff you can't buy legally." Elijah exchanged glances with Milo. "Got it?" Milo nodded, already editing the clip and sending it to Tasha. By morning, the video was circulating on social media under the Crestfield Uncensored account, carefully edited to show Chase's face and the drugs, but blur the faces of the other students. Chase's parents returned home to find their son being questioned by the school administration about potential drug violations. His spot on the football team was suspended pending investigation. The retaliation came swiftly. Monday morning, Elijah found a printout taped to his locker. A fake news article about his violent past at Eastside High, claiming he'd been involved in gang activity and had assaulted a teacher. The article looked professional, complete with fabricated quotes and a publication logo. With Ms. Carter's help, Elijah traced the document to its source. The IP address led back to a computer at Davis Public Relations, Trent's family firm. "They're getting desperate," Ms. Carter observed, deleting the file from her computer. "But be careful. Desperate people are dangerous." Her warning proved prophetic. The next day, someone vandalized the art wing, spray painting "Rats Belong in the Sewer" across Kara's mural of Alicia. Kara stood before the ruined artwork, tears streaming down her face, as Elijah arrived. "I knew they'd come after me eventually," she said, her voice breaking. "But destroying this, it's like they're erasing her all over again." Elijah put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We'll make them pay for this." That night, Elijah broke into the school using a maintenance door code Darius had obtained from a sympathetic janitor. He headed straight for the security office and accessed the camera footage from the art wing. There it was, Logan, alone after basketball practice, pulling a can of black spray paint from his gym bag. Elijah copied the footage, but took it a step further. Using supplies from the chemistry lab, he carefully lifted a fingerprint from the discarded paint can in the trash and emailed a high-resolution photo of it anonymously to the principal with the subject line, "Art Wing Vandalism Evidence." Logan was called in for questioning the next day, but released without punishment after his father made a phone call to the school board. Still, another crack had formed. The five were no longer untouchable. The movement spread beyond Elijah's control. Other students, emboldened by the recent events, formed their own anonymous vigilante groups. Some called themselves the Watchers, others, Justice Crew. Not all shared Elijah's methodical, nonviolent approach. Reports of slashed tires in the faculty parking lot and threatening notes left in lockers began to surface. "This is getting out of hand," Elijah told Kara as they watched a group of sophomore boys harassing one of Trent's friends in the hallway. "They're crossing lines we can't cross." "Isn't this what you wanted?" Kara asked. "The system falling apart?" "Not like this. Revolution without direction becomes chaos, and chaos hurts the innocent first." Elijah spent the next few days trying to rein in the more extreme elements, using the underground network to spread a clear message. Evidence, not violence. Exposure, not vengeance. It was partially successful. The property damage stopped, but the tension in the school remained at a breaking point. Everyone was waiting for the next move in this silent war. It came in the form of after-school detention. Somehow, both Elijah and Trent had been assigned to the same session for minor infractions. Elijah for being late to class, Trent for using his phone during a test. The detention room was silent except for the ticking clock. The supervising teacher, Mr. Harris, dozed at his desk, leaving the two boys essentially alone. For the first hour, neither spoke. Elijah read a book while Trent alternated between glaring at him and texting under the desk. Finally, Trent broke the silence. "You think this is about justice?" he asked, his voice low. "You're just a piece in a much bigger game." Elijah looked up from his book, meeting Trent's gaze. For the first time, he allowed himself a small smile. "And I'm about to flip the board." The black SUV first appeared on Monday, idling across from Elijah's house as he left for school. By Wednesday, it was following him to the corner store. On Friday, it trailed him all the way to the library and back. "Someone's watching you," Kara said as they walked home, her eyes flicking nervously to the vehicle half a block behind them. She pulled out her phone and discreetly snapped a photo of the license plate. That night, Elijah sent the image to Milo with a simple message. "Need info." By morning, Milo had a name. Damian Russo, a security consultant with military background, and connections to several high-profile politicians, including Mayor Davis. His specialty was making problems disappear. "They've called in professional help," Elijah told the underground group during an emergency meeting in Milo's basement. "This changes things." "We should back off," Tasha suggested, fear evident in her voice. "This guy isn't some high school bully." "Backing off is exactly what they expect," Darius countered from his wheelchair. "We've come too far to quit now." Elijah paced the small room, thinking, "We need to change tactics. If they're watching me, we can use that." The plan came, together quickly. Elijah would create a digital trap, a fake leak folder on his school drive containing blurred images and corrupted files that hinted at major revelations. The folder would have a hidden tracker embedded by Milo, designed to ping back to them. If accessed, it worked better than expected. Within hours of uploading the folder, someone accessed it from an IP address outside the school network. Milo traced it to a motel on the edge of town. That's where Damien's operating from, Elijah concluded. Now we know. The next night, while Elijah was studying in his bedroom, he heard a faint noise from the garage. Silent as a shadow, he moved to his window and watched as a figure in dark clothing picked the garage lock and slipped inside. Elijah pressed a button on his phone. Instantly, floodlights illuminated the garage interior and exterior. The motion-detecting cameras his father had installed years ago activated, live streaming to Elijah's tablet. On the screen, Damien Russo stood frozen in the light, his face clearly visible. Elijah calmly dialed 911, speaking clearly, but keeping his identity anonymous. There's an intruder at 1428 Maple Street. He's armed and in the garage right now. The homeowner has him on camera. When police arrived 5 minutes later, Damien was gone, but the footage remained. Elijah sent a copy to the underground group with instructions. Hold for now. We'll need this later. The following day brought news that shocked the school. Brandon Thomas wouldn't be returning to Crestfield. His parents had abruptly transferred him to a boarding school in Vermont after his browsing history was mysteriously leaked to the school administration, revealing he'd been cyberstalking female students and hacking teachers' emails for months. 1. Bully down. 4 to go. Tyler appeared in English class with a split lip and bruised cheek. When Ms. Carter asked what happened, he mumbled something about falling off his bike. After class, Elijah followed Tyler to the bathroom. "Who did that to you?" Elijah demanded once they were alone. Tyler's eyes filled with tears. "My dad. Logan told him that I've been helping you." He touched his bruised face gingerly. "Said I was a traitor." Elijah's usually calm demeanor cracked slightly, anger flashing in his eyes. "This ends now." He brought Ms. Carter into the loop, showing her photos of Tyler's injuries and explaining his suspicions of abuse. As a mandated reporter, she had no choice but to contact Child Protective Services, forcing the school to launch a welfare investigation into Tyler's home situation. The dominoes were falling faster now. That afternoon, Kara burst into the library where Elijah was studying, her face flushed with excitement and fear. "I found something," she whispered, sliding onto the bench beside him. "Behind the vent in the girls' locker room." She pulled out a small SD card sealed in a plastic bag. "I was looking for my earring when I noticed the vent cover was loose." They took the card to Milo immediately after school. His hands trembled as he inserted it into his laptop. "This is time-stamped from last year," he said as files appeared on the screen. The footage was dark, but clear enough. Alicia Rivera, drugged and barely conscious, being dragged to a car in the school parking lot late at night. The license plate was partially visible in one frame. "Can you enhance that?" Elijah asked, leaning forward. Milo worked his magic, cleaning up the image, until the numbers and letters were legible. A quick search revealed the vehicle was registered to Davis Holdings LLC, a subsidiary company owned by Trent's father. "This is it," Elijah breathed. "This is what they've been hiding." The next phase had to be precise. Using anonymous email accounts, the group sent selected clips from the SD card to every member of the school board, along with documentation of other abuses they'd uncovered. The subject line read simply, "Crestfield Academy, the truth." The reaction was swift and chaotic. An emergency school board meeting was called, with parents demanding answers. Mayor Davis held a hastily arranged press conference denying all allegations and blaming a coordinated hacker ring for spreading defamation. Meanwhile, Elijah received an unexpected text from Trent. "My house, 8 p.m., just you and me. We talk, like men, or this gets worse for everyone." Kara grabbed Elijah's arm when he told her, "You can't go. It's obviously a trap." Of course it is, Elijah agreed, which is why I need to be prepared. With Milo's help, Elijah wired himself with a hidden microphone and tiny camera. Additionally, he planted 3 more cameras around Trent's property before approaching the front door. The Davis mansion was impressive, 3 stories of colonial architecture set on manicured grounds. A maid led Elijah to William Davis's study, where Trent waited with his father. The mayor was a taller, grayer version of his son, with the same cold eyes and artificial smile. "Mr. Walker," he said, gesturing to a leather chair. "Please sit. Drink?" He held up a crystal decanter of amber liquid. "No, thank you, sir," Elijah replied politely. "Smart boy," Mayor Davis chuckled, pouring himself a generous glass. "Keeps his wits about him. I can respect that." He settled, behind his massive desk. "I think we can all agree that things at Crestfield have gotten out of hand recently." "That's one way to put it," Elijah said evenly. "Let's cut the crap," Trent interjected, standing by the window. "We know you're behind everything, the leaks, the setups, all of it. Do you have proof of that?" Elijah asked mildly. Mayor Davis laughed. "I like you, kid. You've got balls, but you're playing a game you don't understand." He took a long sip of his drink. "Do you know how many scandals I've buried in this town? How many careers I've ended? The police chief has dinner at my house every Sunday." "Dad," Trent warned, glancing nervously at Elijah. No, let the boy understand what he's up against," Mayor Davis waved off his son's concern. "See, Elijah, people like you come and go. You think you're special because you're smart, because you found some dirt. But in the end, kids like you disappear." His smile never reached his eyes, sometimes literally. "Is that what happened to Alicia Rivera?" Elijah asked quietly. The mayor's smile faltered slightly before returning. "I don't know who that is." "I think you do," Elijah countered. "I think she's one of those scandals you buried." "Careful, boy," Mayor Davis growled, all pretense of friendliness gone. "You're on very thin ice." "I'm curious," Elijah said, leaning forward. "When you had her taken to that rehab facility your company owns, did you think about her parents? Or was she just another problem to make disappear?" The mayor slammed his glass down. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough," Elijah replied calmly. "And now, so does everyone else." At that moment, both Trent and Mayor Davis's phones began buzzing with notifications. The mayor grabbed his phone, his face draining of color as he read the screen. "What did you do?" he demanded, standing abruptly. "Me? Nothing," Elijah said, rising from his chair. "I've been right here the whole time." What he didn't mention was that the entire conversation had been live-streamed to the school auditorium, where the emergency board meeting was taking place. Parents, teachers, and board members watched in horror as Mayor Davis essentially confessed to covering up crimes and threatening a student. Trent lunged at Elijah, but the study door burst open as police officers entered, led by a grim-faced detective who was decidedly not the mayor's Sunday dinner companion. "William Davis, you're under arrest," the detective announced, reciting Miranda rights as another officer handcuffed the shocked mayor. Elijah slipped out during the chaos, making his way through the gathered crowd outside the Davis mansion. News vans were already arriving, reporters shouting questions at anyone who would listen. In the midst of the crowd, Elijah felt a hand grip his. Kara stood beside him, her eyes wide with disbelief and relief. "It worked," she whispered. "It actually worked." Elijah nodded, watching as Mayor Davis was led to a police car, cameras flashing around him. Trent stood in the doorway of the mansion screaming obscenities, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. "This is just the beginning," Elijah said quietly. "The real fight is still coming." As if to confirm his words, Elijah spotted Damien Russo on the edge of the crowd, watching him with cold calculation. The fixer might have lost this battle, but he was far from defeated. The board of Crestfield Academy would be in chaos. The remaining members of the Five would be desperate. And somewhere in the shadows, powers bigger than a high school bully, or even a corrupt mayor, were taking notice of the boy who had upended their carefully constructed system. Elijah Walker had flipped the board, just as he'd promised. Now he had to be ready for the consequences. The morning after Mayor Davis's arrest, Crestfield Academy resembled a war zone. News vans clogged the entrance, reporters thrusting microphones at arriving students. Police officers stood at strategic points around campus, their presence both reassuring and unsettling. Elijah slipped in through a side entrance, keeping his head down. He'd barely slept, spending most of the night coordinating with the underground, group and fielding texts from concerned parents who'd somehow gotten his number. The weight of what he'd set in motion pressed heavily on his shoulders. He was halfway to his locker when the commotion started, shouting from the main hallway, followed by the unmistakable sound of something slamming against metal. Elijah rounded the corner to find Trent Davis surrounded by students with phones out, recording his meltdown. Trent looked nothing like the polished, privileged boy who'd ruled Crestfield weeks ago. His hair was unwashed, his expensive clothes rumpled as if he'd slept in them. Dark circles shadowed his eyes as he slammed his fist repeatedly into a locker. "You think this is funny?" he screamed at the gathered crowd. "My father's a great man. He built this town while your parents were living in trailers." A reporter who'd somehow slipped past security thrust a microphone toward him. "Trent, how do you respond to allegations that your father covered up the Alicia Rivera incident?" Something feral flashed in Trent's eyes. He lunged at the reporter, knocking the microphone away. Two teachers rushed forward, restraining him as he continued to shout obscenities. The entire scene was captured on dozens of phones, instantly uploaded to social media. Elijah watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. This wasn't satisfaction he felt. It was something more complicated. The destruction of a person, even someone like Trent, wasn't something to celebrate. "Is this what you wanted?" Elijah turned to find Tyler beside him, his bruises now yellowing at the edges. The boy looked both relieved and terrified, like someone who'd escaped one prison only to find himself in another. "No," Elijah answered, honestly, "but it's what needed to happen." By third period, Principal Whitmore had called a mandatory assembly in the auditorium. Students filed in under the watchful eyes of teachers and the few board members who hadn't resigned overnight. Principal Whitmore, a thin, nervous man who'd always seemed more administrator than educator, stood at the podium, hands gripping, its edges as if for support. "Recent events have cast a shadow over our beloved institution," he began, voice strained with forced calm. "I want to assure everyone that Crestfield Academy remains committed to excellence and integrity." A collective snort of disbelief rippled through the audience. "However," Whitmore continued, "we cannot allow false narratives and vigilante student conduct to undermine our educational mission. Those who have engaged in hacking, spreading rumors, or otherwise disrupting school operations will face severe consequences." Though he named no names, his gaze lingered on Elijah, who sat calmly in the middle rows, Kara beside him. After the assembly, Ms. Carter caught up with Elijah in the hallway. "Be careful," she warned, her voice low. "Whitmore's been on the phone with the remaining board members all morning. They're looking for a scapegoat." "Let them look," Elijah replied. "They won't find anything connecting me directly." Ms. Carter smiled sadly. "Evidence doesn't matter now, Elijah. They need someone to blame, and you're the obvious target." She glanced around before adding, "I spoke up at the emergency staff meeting, reminded them that targeting students without proof would be another scandal. Now I'm being reviewed for unprofessional conduct." Elijah frowned. "They can't do that. You've done nothing wrong. Power doesn't need right on its side, just momentum." She squeezed his shoulder. "Watch your back." That afternoon, as Elijah crossed the courtyard between classes, a small figure approached him, a girl he didn't recognize immediately. She was thin to the point of fragility, her once vibrant red hair cut short and uneven. But as she drew closer, Elijah recognized her from the photos in Kara's sketchbook. "Alicia?" he whispered, stopping in his tracks. She nodded, eyes darting nervously around them. "Not here," she murmured. "After school. Art room." Hours later, Elijah and Kara sat across from Alicia in the empty art classroom. Kara could barely contain her emotions, alternating between staring at her friend in disbelief and wiping away tears. They told my parents I had a psychotic break, Alicia explained, her voice soft but steady. That I was a danger to myself and needed specialized treatment. The facility is owned by a Davis Holdings subsidiary. They keep kids like me, problems for powerful people, sedated and isolated until we're no longer threats. How did you get out? Elijah asked. When the news about Mayor Davis broke, there was confusion at the facility. Staff started quitting, afraid of being implicated. During shift change, I just walked out. She twisted her hands in her lap. My parents didn't even know where I really was. They were told I was at a therapeutic boarding school in Colorado. Kara reached across the table, taking Alicia's hands in hers. What happened that night, at the party? Alicia's eyes grew distant. I overheard something I shouldn't have. Logan and Chase were talking with Mayor Davis in the study, something about offshore accounts and campaign funds. When they realized I was there, she shuddered. They drugged my drink. Next thing I remember clearly is waking up at the facility. Elijah nodded, pieces falling into place. They didn't just send you away because of what you heard. They did it to send a message to everyone else. A warning, Alicia agreed. Cross them, and you disappear. News of Logan's downfall came the following day. Federal authorities had traced the underground website where he'd been selling videos of humiliation and hazing. His house was raided before dawn, computers and phones confiscated. Though still a minor, the severity of the charges, distribution of exploitative content of minors, cybercrimes, extortion, meant he was placed under strict surveillance, his internet access revoked. Yet when Elijah passed him in the hallway, Logan's arrogance remained intact. "This isn't over," he muttered, shoulder-checking Elijah hard. "You have no idea what's coming for you." The warning proved prophetic, but not in the way Logan intended. That afternoon during football practice, Chase Wilson snapped. After being benched by Coach Bennett for poor performance, he tackled a teammate with such violence that the boy's collarbone shattered. It took 3 coaches to pull Chase off the injured player, his face contorted with uncontrolled rage. "This is all because of him!" Chase screamed, pointing toward the school building, though Elijah wasn't present. "That lying piece of—" His words were cut short as security guards escorted him from the field. By nightfall, he'd been suspended indefinitely and charged with assault. That should have been the end of it. But 2 nights later, as Elijah walked home from the library, a truck screeched around the corner behind him. Instinct made him dive toward a neighbor's hedge just as Chase's pickup mounted the curb where he'd been standing. Chase leapt from the driver's seat, face twisted with fury and something else, desperation perhaps, or fear. "You ruined everything," he shouted, stumbling slightly. The smell of alcohol wafted from him as he lurched toward Elijah. Before he could reach him, flashing lights illuminated the scene. A police cruiser pulled up, one of several that had been quietly patrolling Elijah's neighborhood since Mayor Davis's arrest. Chase was arrested on the spot, this time for attempted assault and driving under the influence. 3 down. 2-2, go. But as the 5 crumbled, a new threat emerged. Headmaster Richard Graves, chairman of the board and longtime friend of the Davis family, called an emergency board meeting to address the crisis of order at Crestfield. Elijah wasn't present, but Milo had planted a small recording device in the conference room. The playback revealed Graves's true agenda. "This chaos must end," the headmaster's voice declared on the recording. "The Davis situation is unfortunate, but our priority must be restoring order and Crestfield's reputation. I propose immediate expulsions for any students connected to these disruptive activities." "Without due process," a female board member objected. "We're a private institution," Graves countered smoothly. "Our contract with parents gives us broad discretion in disciplinary matters." The following Monday, 6 students, all loosely connected to Elijah's resistance, received expulsion notices. None had been directly involved in leaking evidence or hacking systems, but all had participated in protests or spoken to the media. "It's a warning shot," Elijah told the underground group, now meeting in Sarah's garage since Milo's house was under scrutiny. "Graves is sending a message. Support the resistance. Lose your future. He can't expel everyone, Darius argued. He doesn't need to, Elijah replied grimly. Just enough to scare the rest into silence. The true blow came 2 days later when police officers walked into the computer lab and arrested Milo in front of his classmates. The charge: implementing a malware attack on school systems that compromise student and faculty personal data. It's fabricated, Tasha insisted when she called Elijah with the news. Milo would never do something that sloppy or destructive. Of course it's fabricated, Elijah agreed. Graves is picking us off one by one. He instructed Tasha to recover a copy of Milo's original code from their backup drive, proof that the malware signature didn't match Milo's work. It wouldn't be enough to free him immediately, but it might create reasonable doubt. As pressure mounted, Kara found her own way to resist. She spent 3 consecutive nights in the art room, emerging with a massive canvas titled, "The Untouchables Fall." The painting showed cracked porcelain masks floating above shadowy figures, with golden threads binding them to larger, more menacing shapes looming above. She hung it in the main hallway without permission, part of what was supposed to be a student art showcase. By morning, photos of the mural had gone viral, art critics and political commentators analyzing its symbolism online. Principal Whitmore summoned Kara to his office, demanding she apologize and remove the inflammatory artwork. "It's just a painting," Kara replied calmly. "If people see certain parallels to recent events, that's their interpretation." She was given detention but refused to take the painting down. By the end of the day, someone had hung a small plaque beside it reading, "Donated to Crestfield's Permanent Collection." That evening, Elijah sat alone in his room, surrounded by printouts, digital records, and notes from the past weeks. For the first time since arriving at Crestfield, doubt crept into his mind. The situation had escalated beyond anything he'd anticipated. One student arrested, others expelled, faculty threatened, lives derailed. "Did I just turn this school into a war zone?" he whispered to the empty room. His phone buzzed with a text from Kara. "Need to talk. Meet me at the park." 20 minutes later, they sat side by side on a bench, watching younger kids play on the swings as evening settled around them. "I heard about your moment of doubt from Tasha," Kara said without preamble. "Don't. People are getting hurt," Elijah responded, staring at his hands. "That wasn't the plan." "People were already getting hurt," Kara countered, her voice firm. "Alicia, Darius, all the kids who transferred out or suffered in silence. The difference is now the right people are feeling the consequences." She turned, to face him fully. "Remember when you told Tyler that he needed to choose which side he wanted to be on when everything fell apart? Well, everything's falling apart now. Which side are you on?" Before Elijah could answer, a familiar voice called his name. Tyler jogged up to them, looking over his shoulder nervously. "I've been trying to find you," he panted. "There's someone you need to meet." Tyler led them to a coffee shop several blocks away. In a corner booth sat an older man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, nursing a cup of tea as he read a book. "Mr. Rayner," Tyler said as they approached. "This is Elijah and Kara." The man looked up, studying them with intelligent eyes. "So you're the ones turning Crestfield upside down," he said, gesturing for them to sit. "I've been waiting a long time for someone like you." "Mr. Rayner taught history at Crestfield for 20 years, Tyler explained. Until I made the mistake of questioning the Davis family's influence over the school," Rayner finished. 3 years ago, I discovered financial irregularities in the scholarship fund. Money meant for underprivileged students was being redirected to legacy family accounts. "Let me guess," Elijah said. "You reported it and were fired." "Worse," Rayner replied grimly. "They destroyed me. Fabricated evidence that I'd been inappropriate with female students. No charges were filed, there was no actual evidence, but the whispers were enough. No school would hire me. My pension disappeared in legal fees." "And Headmaster Graves?" Kara asked. "Orchestrated the whole thing," Rayner confirmed. "Richard Graves isn't just a headmaster. He's the keeper of secrets for Crestfield's elite families. And he has dirt on everyone who matters in this town." Elijah leaned forward. What kind of dirt? Rayner smiled thinly. The kind that makes a humble educator's salary afford a summer home in the Hamptons and a collection of rare antiques. He slid a flash drive across the table. I've been gathering evidence since my dismissal. Not enough to bring him down alone, but perhaps combined with what you have. Elijah pocketed the drive, a new determination settling over him. Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Don't thank me yet, the former teacher warned. Graves isn't like the others. He's careful, patient, and utterly ruthless. If you go after him, make sure you don't miss. The basement of Elijah's house became command central for what they now called Operation Archive. Maps and timelines covered the walls. Laptops hummed on folding tables. The remaining members of the underground group, Elijah, Kara, Tasha, Darius, Sarah, Tyler, and now Mr. Rayner, gathered to plan their final offensive against Headmaster Graves and the corrupt system he protected. Graves has been at Crestfield for over 20 years, Rayner explained, tapping a photo of the stern-faced headmaster. He started as a history teacher like me, but quickly moved into administration. His rise coincided with large donations from certain families, Davis, Wilson, Mitchell. The same families as the five, Kara noted. Not coincidence, Elijah said. Graves protected their kids, guaranteed their success in exchange for financial support and connections. But there has to be more, Darius insisted from his wheelchair. You don't risk your career and freedom just for donations. Rayner nodded grimly. There is more. Much more. The problem is finding concrete evidence. Milo's absence was keenly felt as they struggled with the technical aspects of their investigation. Released on bail but under house arrest with no internet access, he could only offer advice via handwritten notes delivered by his younger sister. One such note proved crucial. Check the original blueprints. Buildings that old always have secrets. With Rayner's help, they accessed the county archives and found Crestfield's original construction plans from 1924. Comparing them with modern renovations revealed a discrepancy. A basement room that appeared in the original plans but was absent from all recent documents. It's been deliberately removed from the records, Elijah observed, tracing the missing space with his finger. But the room should still physically exist. Late Friday night, using access codes provided by the sympathetic janitor who'd helped them before, the group entered Crestfield through the maintenance entrance. Guided by the old blueprints, they made their way to the basement level, past the boiler room and storage areas, to a section blocked by a seemingly solid wall. According to this, there should be a door right here, Tasha whispered, shining her flashlight on the blueprint. Elijah ran his hands along the wall, feeling for irregularities. His fingers detected a slight seam, barely visible. Here, he murmured, but how do we open it? It was Kara who found the mechanism, a maintenance panel nearby that, when a specific sequence of breakers was flipped, caused the false wall to slide partially open. The room beyond was thick with dust and smelled of mildew and old paper. Their flashlights revealed shelves of file boxes, outdated computer equipment, and, most disturbing, what appeared to be surveillance apparatus. What is this place? Tyler whispered, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. An archive, Rayner answered grimly, and a control center. They worked methodically, photographing everything before disturbing it. The file boxes contained student records going back decades, with special attention to incidents involving prominent families. One section held financial ledgers documenting what could only be described as a sophisticated blackmail operation. Payments to local officials, journalists, even parents who'd threatened to go public with complaints. Most damning were the surveillance logs. Hidden cameras had been installed throughout the school, not just in hallways and classrooms, but in locker rooms, private offices, even the student council room. The footage was categorized by potential value: leverage, insurance, immediate. Action. He's been watching everyone, Sarah whispered, horrified. Students, teachers, administrators, collecting dirt on all of them. Not just collecting, Elijah corrected, opening a folder labeled Annual Traditions. Inside were photos and detailed accounts of initiation rituals for legacy students, hazing events that went far beyond typical school pranks. He's been orchestrating, and the folder contained years of documentation, confirming what they'd suspected. Alicia's incident wasn't isolated. It was part of a pattern, a tradition where promising students who weren't from the right families were systematically broken, silenced, or removed. There must be dozens of victims, Kara murmured, flipping through pages with trembling hands. Hundreds, Rayner corrected, over decades. As dawn approached, they carefully replaced everything except for copies of the most damning documents. They couldn't remove the originals without alerting Graves that the room had been discovered, but the evidence they'd gathered was explosive enough to bring down not just the headmaster, but the entire network of corruption surrounding Crestfield. "What, now?" Tyler asked as they gathered back at Elijah's house, exhausted but energized by their discovery. "Now we plan the reveal," Elijah replied. "But we need to be strategic. Release everything at once, and it'll be dismissed as an information dump. Too much to process." "We need to build the narrative," Kara suggested. "Start small, then escalate." Tasha, whose AV club experience made her their technical expert in Milo's absence, proposed their first move. The morning announcements. "I can hack the feed, show just enough to create questions without revealing our full hand." 2 days later, as students settled into their homerooms for the daily video announcements, the usual cheery student news team was replaced by a black screen. Then, blurred clips from the secret files appeared, with a simple caption: "More truth. Coming soon." The reaction was immediate. Students buzzed with speculation. Teachers looked nervous. By lunchtime, Principal Whitmore had called an assembly denying any alleged improprieties and warning against malicious pranks. But the damage was done. Questions were being asked. Parents who had previously remained silent began calling the school, demanding explanations about everything from financial discrepancies to the sudden disappearances of former students like Alicia. Non-elite parents, those without political connections or wealth, formed an ad hoc committee demanding an open hearing. The school board, already in disarray after Mayor Davis's arrest, was split between those loyal to Graves and those fearing further scandal. Cornered, Graves went on the offensive. In a special parents' meeting, he directly accused certain transfer students, not naming Elijah but making it clear who he meant, of orchestrating a campaign to destabilize the school. "These attacks on our institution come from those who don't understand or respect Crestfield's traditions," he declared. "Rest assured we will identify the perpetrators and they will face the severest consequences." The threat hung in the air, its target obvious to everyone present. That evening, Elijah received a frantic call from Kara. "Tyler's missing," she said, her voice tight with fear. "He was supposed to meet us at the library to go over more documents, but he never showed. His mom hasn't seen him since school let out." Cold dread settled in Elijah's stomach. Minutes later, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You play with fire, people get burned." Attached was a photo of Tyler, blindfolded and tied to a chair. Kara arrived at Elijah's house shortly after, her eyes red from crying. "This is my fault," she said, pacing his living room. "I got him involved. I pushed him to stand up to them." "This isn't on you," Elijah interrupted firmly. "It's on Graves and whoever took Tyler." "What do we do now?" she asked, looking lost for the first time since he'd met her. Before Elijah could answer, headlights swept across his front window. A black SUV had pulled up across the street, the same one that had been following him weeks earlier. "Stay here," Elijah instructed, moving to the front door. "Lock it behind me." Elijah, no. But he was already stepping outside, walking calmly toward the vehicle. The driver's door opened, and Damian Russo emerged, his face expressionless in the dim streetlight. "We need to talk," Damian said, gesturing to the empty parking lot of a closed convenience store down the block. They stood facing each other in the deserted lot, Elijah maintaining a careful distance. Despite the cool night air, Damian wore only a light jacket, making it clear he wasn't concealing a weapon, a deliberate choice to signal this wasn't an attack. "Where's Tyler?" Elijah demanded without preamble. Safe for now, Damien replied. Whether he stays that way is up to you. What do you want? It's simple. Destroy all the evidence you've gathered, transfer to another school, leave Crestfield and everyone associated with it alone. Damien's voice was calm, almost reasonable. Do that, and Tyler goes home unharmed. Refuse, and... He let the implication hang in the air. Elijah's face revealed nothing, but his mind raced, calculating possibilities. The conversation was being recorded by the small device in his pocket, the same one he'd used at the Davis mansion. But evidence of a kidnapping threat wouldn't help Tyler if Elijah couldn't find him in time. I need proof he's alive and unharmed. Elijah said. A phone call. Damien considered this, then nodded once. I'll arrange it. You'll have until tomorrow night to decide. And if I go to the police? Then this conversation never happened, and Tyler becomes another unfortunate runaway. Damien turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, this isn't personal. Just business. The next morning, Elijah found a flash drive taped to his locker. It contained 2 files, a video of Tyler, clearly recorded within the past few hours, and an audio file that made Elijah's pulse quicken. The recording captured an argument between Damien and Headmaster Graves. This wasn't what I hired you for, Graves's voice hissed. You hired me to clean up a mess, Damien replied coolly. Sometimes cleaning requires extreme measures. Kidnapping a student wasn't part of the deal. If this comes back on me, it won't, unless you keep talking about it in unsecured locations. And maybe next time, pay your contractors what they're worth. Elijah listened to the recording 3 times, confirming what he'd suspected. Graves had hired Damien as a fixer, but the kidnapping had been Damien's independent decision, possibly leverage against both sides. This changed the dynamics. If Graves didn't know Tyler's exact location, there was a potential wedge to drive between them. That night, after everyone else had gone home, Elijah broke into Graves's personal office, using a keycard duplicated from the maintenance staff's master. Inside, he found what he was looking for: documents showing regular payments to Damien, but also evidence of blackmail payments to local police, press contacts, and even some parents of former students. The web of corruption centered on Graves was even more extensive than they'd imagined. The headmaster wasn't just covering up student misconduct, he was running a sophisticated operation that silenced critics, removed threats, and maintained the status quo at any cost. With this final piece of evidence in hand, Elijah implemented the last phase of their plan. The following day was the school's live debate final, an event broadcast on the local educational channel and attended by parents, alumni, and community leaders. As team captain, Kara was scheduled to deliver the opening remarks, but when she approached the podium, she simply stepped aside, allowing Elijah to take her place. Before anyone could stop him, Elijah began speaking directly to the camera, his voice clear and unwavering. He named names. He displayed evidence of the rituals, the cover-ups, the blackmail. He showed the documents linking Graves to decades of corruption. And finally, he played the recording of Graves and Damien discussing Tyler's kidnapping. This is just the beginning, Elijah concluded, staring directly into the camera as security guards approached the stage. The truth about Crestfield Academy will not be buried again. The broadcast cut off abruptly, but it was too late. The revelation had gone out live to hundreds of viewers. Within minutes, police were entering the school, this time with warrants for Graves and questions about a missing student named Tyler Freeman. The war had entered its final phase, and there would be no going back. The morning after Elijah's broadcast, Crestfield Academy awoke to a transformed reality. News helicopters circled overhead. Police cars lined the circular driveway. Reporters shouted questions at anyone entering the building. The school that had stood as a bastion of privilege for generations now found itself under siege. Elijah arrived, early, slipping through a service entrance with Kara. They'd barely slept, coordinating with police to help locate Tyler while simultaneously managing the fallout from the broadcast. Their phones hadn't stopped buzzing with messages from students, parents, and even national media outlets. You ready for this? Kara asked, squeezing his hand as they paused in the empty hallway. Elijah nodded, his expression resolute. No turning back now. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Teachers huddled in small groups, whispering urgently. Administrative staff darted between offices, carrying files and looking panicked. At the center of it all, Headmaster Graves stood in the main office, surrounded by police officers and a man in a suit who appeared to be his lawyer. When Graves spotted Elijah through the glass partition, his face contorted with rage. He jabbed a finger in Elijah's direction, clearly demanding the officers do something. Instead, one of them handed Graves a document that made his face drain of color. "Federal subpoena," Sarah whispered, appearing beside Elijah. "My dad's a lawyer. He says the FBI is involved now. Something about crossing state lines with minors and RICO violations." Students filled the hallways as the first bell approached, but the usual morning routine quickly dissolved. A group of seniors gathered in the courtyard, holding hastily made signs. "Where is Tyler? No more secrets. Justice for Alicia." Others joined them, their numbers swelling until more than 50 students stood in silent protest. Principal Whitmore appeared on the steps, his voice strained as he attempted to herd everyone to class. "This is not an authorized assembly. All students must report to their first period classes immediately." No one moved. "This is your final warning," Whitmore continued, his voice rising. "Anyone who fails to comply will face disciplinary." "We're not afraid anymore," a voice called out. Darius, wheeling his chair to the front of the crowd. "Suspensions, expulsions, those threats only work when we have something to lose. But they took that from us already." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. More students emerged from the building, swelling their numbers. Whispers spread that Graves was being questioned by federal agents, that evidence of decades of abuse had been uncovered. As the crowd grew, Elijah and Kara exchanged glances. This was more than they'd planned, a spontaneous uprising that couldn't be controlled or directed. It had taken on a life of its own. Kara stepped forward, climbing onto a bench to address the crowd. "This isn't just about the 5 anymore," she called out, her voice strong despite her usual shyness. "It's about a system that protected abusers while silencing victims. It's about Alicia and Darius and everyone who was hurt while the adults looked away." A cheer went up. Someone started chanting, walk out," and within moments, the entire courtyard had taken up the cry. Elijah moved to Kara's side, surveying the crowd with a mixture of awe and concern. "This could get out of hand," he murmured. "Or it could be exactly what needs to happen," she replied. They organized quickly, turning the chaotic energy into a structured protest. Kara coordinated with the art students to create signs listing the names of known victims. Darius rallied the athletes, many of whom had witnessed Chase's brutality firsthand. Sarah handled communications, creating a shared document where students could safely report abuses they'd experienced or witnessed. By noon, over 300 students had left class to join the demonstration in front of the school. Parents began arriving, some to support their children, others to demand answers from the administration. The local news teams, already on scene for the Graves investigation, captured it all. Whitmore, desperate to regain control, called the police to disperse the crowd. But when officers arrived, it wasn't to arrest students, it was to serve additional subpoenas to school officials. One officer, clearly unimpressed with Whitmore's panic, informed him that peaceful assembly was protected speech, especially when students were protesting potential criminal activity by school leadership. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the lawn, a black SUV pulled up to the edge of the crowd. Students parted as Damian Russo emerged, his face grim. Behind him, Tyler climbed out of the vehicle, looking exhausted but unharmed. A cheer went up as Elijah and Kara rushed forward. Tyler fell into their embrace, his body trembling with relief. "He just let me go," Tyler said, bewildered. "Said there was no point anymore." Damian stood awkwardly nearby, his professional composure cracked for the first time. "They aren't paying me enough to go down for kidnapping," he said quietly to Elijah. "And Graves tried to set me up as the fall guy." He handed Elijah a thumb. "Drive. Insurance. Everything I know about the operation, including names you haven't uncovered yet." Before Elijah could respond, police officers approached. Damien nodded once, then turned and offered his wrists for the handcuffs. As they led him away, he called over his shoulder, "Check the last file. There's more to this than just Crestfield." The thumb drive proved invaluable. Beyond confirming what they already knew about Graves and his network, it contained the location of the final backup server, storing years of blackmail footage, hidden in a storage unit registered to a shell company. With Tyler safe and federal, authorities building their case, Milo's situation improved rapidly. The fabricated charges against him were dismissed when Tasha presented the original code that proved the malware attack couldn't have been his work. Released from house arrest, he immediately set to work hacking the alumni cloud server where decades of communications had been stored. "It's all here," he told the group as they crowded around his computer. Emails, payments, agreements, 20 years of covering up abuse and silencing victims. The data dump was staggering. Receipts for payoffs to local officials, video evidence of hazing rituals approved by administration, emails discussing which students needed to be managed and which could be salvaged for the school's benefit. Perhaps most damning were the communications with parents, showing how wealthy families had essentially purchased immunity for their children. News of the scandal spread nationwide. Alumni began coming forward with their own stories of abuse and cover-ups dating back decades. A major class action lawsuit took shape, led by Alicia's parents, who had transformed from confused victims into vocal advocates for justice. "My daughter was drugged, kidnapped, and imprisoned to protect powerful men," Alicia's mother told reporters, her voice breaking but determined. "How many other children suffered while we were lied to? This ends now." As pressure mounted, Graves made his final desperate move. Late one night, security cameras captured him attempting to flee his mansion with suitcases full of cash and documents. Police, already monitoring his residence, arrested him in the driveway as news cameras rolled. The image became iconic. The distinguished headmaster in handcuffs, his carefully cultivated mask of authority shattered as he was guided into a police cruiser. From the sidelines, Elijah watched silently, thinking of his father's words. "You don't need fists when you have foresight." In the days that followed, the five completed their dissolution. Logan, already under investigation for his video business, was indicted on multiple federal charges. Brandon remained out of state. Reportedly under psychiatric care after a breakdown, Chase faced sentencing for his assault on the football field and the attempted attack on Elijah. Tyler had fully defected, becoming a key witness in the case against Graves and the others. Only Trent remained unaccounted for, vanished after his initial breakdown, his location unknown until Elijah received a cryptic text from an anonymous number. "You may have taken down the school, but this was never just about the school." The message ended with GPS coordinates for a meeting location and a time, midnight. Elijah showed the message to Kara, who immediately protested. "It's obviously a trap. After everything that's happened, you can't seriously be thinking of meeting him alone." "I'm not," Elijah assured her, "but I need to know what he means. This wasn't just about the school." They decided on a compromise. Elijah would go, but with backup. Milo monitoring remotely through surveillance and police officers stationed nearby, ready to intervene if necessary. That night, as Elijah approached the meeting spot, an abandoned boathouse on the lake, he found Trent already waiting. The former king of Crestfield sat alone on a weathered dock staring out at the water. Without his usual entourage or polished appearance, he seemed smaller somehow, diminished. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Trent said without turning. "I almost didn't," Elijah replied, keeping a safe distance. Trent finally looked at him, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. "You know, I actually thought I was the good guy in this story. The legacy kid protecting traditions. The mayor's son upholding order." He laughed bitterly. "That's what they trained us to believe, that we were special. Chosen, and now I know we were just pawns." Trent reached into his jacket, causing Elijah to tense, but he only pulled out an envelope. "My father didn't just run this town. He answered to people. Powerful people who use schools like Crestfield to identify and groom the next generation. I don't even know what to call them. Collaborators? Soldiers? For what? That's the question, isn't it? Trent placed the envelope on the dock between them. These are names, connections, offshore accounts. Things I found in my father's study before the Fed seized everything. Elijah eyed the envelope warily. Why give this to me? Because you're the only one who might actually do something with it, Trent answered, standing to leave. And because I need to know that something good might come from this disaster. As Trent walked away, he paused. They'll come for you now, you know. People much more dangerous than school bullies or small-town
politicians. Watch your back, Walker.
The following morning, a different kind of letter arrived for Elijah, an official-looking envelope bearing the seal of Madison University, one of the nation's most prestigious institutions. Inside was an invitation to a youth leadership summit. All expenses paid. Congratulations on your recent civic engagement, the letter read. Your advocacy has impressed our committee, and we believe you would be a valuable addition to our Emerging Leaders program. The signature at the bottom belonged to Dr. James Harrison, a former military intelligence officer who, according to a quick search, had once worked alongside Elijah's father. Later that day, Kara rushed up to him in the hallway, waving an identical envelope. Did you get one too? The Madison invitation? Elijah nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. Something bigger is happening, Kara. Something beyond Crestfield. What do we do? He smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. We keep fighting. 6 months later, Crestfield Academy barely resembled its former self. Gone were the exclusive cliques and privileged hierarchies. The marble halls still gleamed, but they echoed with different voices, a more diverse student body moving freely where invisible boundaries had once divided them. Ms. Carter, now serving as interim principal, had implemented sweeping reforms. Scholarship programs were expanded. Anonymous reporting systems for misconduct were established. A student-faculty ethics committee reviewed all major disciplinary decisions. On a bright spring morning, students and faculty gathered on the front lawn for the unveiling of a memorial, a simple stone wall inscribed with names of those who had suffered under the old regime. Alicia stood before the crowd, her red hair grown out, her posture straight and confident as she addressed her peers. For years, silence protected the powerful while isolating the vulnerable, she said, her voice clear in the morning air. This memorial honors those who were silenced, but it also celebrates those who finally spoke up. It reminds us that no system is too entrenched to change when enough people demand justice. Among the audience, Elijah watched quietly from the back row. He'd kept a lower profile since the scandal broke, allowing others to take leadership roles in rebuilding the school. The spotlight never suited him anyway. He preferred to work from the shadows, observing and strategizing. After the ceremony, as crowds dispersed, a familiar figure approached him beneath an oak tree. Quite the legacy you've left, Trent said, hands in the pockets of his simple jacket, a far cry from the designer clothes he once wore. Elijah studied him carefully. Trent had returned to Crestfield after a brief disappearance, but as a changed person. His family's fortune was largely gone, seized in the federal investigation. His former status had evaporated, yet somehow he seemed more at peace than before. We all played our parts, Elijah replied neutrally, some better than others. Trent glanced around the transformed campus. I used to think power meant having others fear you. Now I wonder if real power is something else entirely. Like what? Like what you did, seeing the whole board when everyone else was focused on individual pieces. They stood in silence for a moment, not friends but no longer enemies, two players from opposite sides of a game that had changed them both. What will you do now? Elijah finally asked. Trent shrugged. Community college in the fall, maybe law school eventually. Use the family name for something worthwhile for once. He hesitated. And you? I heard about Madison. Still deciding, Elijah said, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. With a nod of understanding, Trent walked away, leaving Elijah alone with his thoughts. Later that week, Kara's letter to the press was published, an opinion piece titled, "Portraits of Power," that detailed the transformation of Crestfield without naming specific students. She credited those who stood up when silence was easier, while reflecting on the broader implications for educational institutions nationwide. The article went viral, drawing attention from major news outlets and education reformers. Kara, once the quiet artist on the margins, found herself being interviewed about systemic change and student advocacy. She handled the attention with grace, always redirecting focus to the broader movement rather than individual actions. Meanwhile, Mr. Rayner's book about the scandal, The Legacy Machine, How Elite Schools Manufacture Power, became an overnight bestseller. Though he changed names and specific details to protect privacy, anyone familiar with the events could recognize the story of Crestfield and the students who brought down its corrupt infrastructure. One rainy afternoon, Elijah visited his father's grave for the first time since the whole ordeal began. The simple headstone stood stark against the green cemetery lawn. Samuel Walker, beloved father, truth-bearer. "I understand now," Elijah said quietly to the stone. "What you were preparing me for. Why you kept those files. Why you taught me what you did." He placed a single white rose at the base of the headstone, water droplets glistening on its petals. "You knew what they were doing at places like Crestfield. You were building a case, weren't you? Until they stopped you." The rain fell gently around him, a soft curtain separating him from the rest of the world. In that private moment, Elijah felt his father's presence more strongly than he had since the funeral, not as a ghost or supernatural force, but as a legacy living on through actions and choices. The invitation to Madison University's Leadership Summit arrived with a formal acceptance package. Elijah had delayed his response, weighing his options carefully. The summit would connect him with like-minded young activists from across the country, students who had challenged corrupt systems in their own communities. What sealed his decision was discovering that his father had once been a whistleblower in a similar scandal at another institution, silenced before he could complete his investigation. The pieces fell into place: his father's military intelligence background, the encrypted files, the training in strategy and observation. Samuel Walker had been fighting the same war, just on a different battlefront. National recognition came, swiftly, as news of the Crestfield reforms spread. Educational policy experts cited the case in arguments for greater oversight of private institutions. Legal scholars debated the implications for accountability in academic settings. And through it all, a network began to form, students from different schools connecting online, sharing strategies, building a movement that transcended any single campus. The underground group from Crestfield became the founding members of what they called Watchtower Rising, a youth coalition dedicated to exposing corruption in educational institutions across the country. Their website featured anonymous reporting tools, legal resources, and forums where students could share experiences and find support. The night before leaving for the Madison Summit, Elijah received a final package, a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a map marked with coordinates, a key to a storage unit, and a handwritten note in familiar handwriting. "You've passed the first test. The real game begins now. The corruption at Crestfield is just one symptom of a deeper disease. Follow the coordinates when you're ready." "Dad." Elijah stared at the note, questions racing through his mind. His father had left this for him, a final mission, a continuing path. Somehow, Samuel had known his son would finish what he started, and had prepared accordingly. The next morning, Elijah and Kara boarded a train to Madison University. Neither spoke much during the journey, both lost in thoughts about what lay ahead. They had changed so much in such a short time, from isolated students to reluctant revolutionaries to something they didn't yet have a name for. As they approached the campus, Kara finally broke the silence. "Are we ready for this? Whatever this turns out to be?" Elijah thought of the map in his bag, the coordinates to unknown territory, the battle that had only just begun. "We've never been more ready." They walked into the grand hall where the summit was being held, a room filled with young faces from diverse backgrounds, all sharing a common purpose. As the doors closed behind them, a quiet voice spoke from nearby. "Welcome to the resistance." Elijah turned to find a woman with intelligent eyes and a determined expression, someone who carried herself with the same purpose his father had. She extended her hand. "I'm Dr. Harrison. James was my colleague, and your father was our friend. We've been waiting for you both." Elijah took her hand, feeling the weight of legacy and the promise of revolution in equal measure. The game board had expanded, the stakes had risen, but the mission remained the same: to bring light to darkness, to hold power accountable, to stand when others could not. The real work was just beginning. Have you ever wondered what happens when the powerful mistake silence for weakness? Like this video if you've ever witnessed justice unfold in unexpected ways, and subscribe for more stories about underdogs who flip the board when everyone least expects it.